worked as an executive in the outdoor education and health and wellness space, where she developed a deep passion for fostering connection between people, our natural environment, and food we eat. Inspired by the robust farm-to-table focus in her hometown of Asheville, Jessie started Asheville Tea Company in 2016 with a mission to source herbs and botanicals grown in the southeastern United States for her tea blends, to cultivate a connection for consumers from seed to sip, and develop regional value chains that benefit the local community. Here's Jessie Dean.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Mic check. Okay, nice. These mics. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to have people in the session. I didn't really know what to expect, so I really appreciate everyone coming today. And I wanted to start out actually by getting an idea of who's in the room. How many of you are tea farmers? Sweet. Or growers? Farmers, growers. How many of you are tea makers? Producers? Awesome. What about retailers? Sweet, a lot of retailers, that's cool. And cafes, restaurants? Nice. Tea rooms? Yeah. Did I miss anything? Big headings, importers, I guess? Importers, brokers?
Yeah.
Yep.
Manufacturers.
Manufacturers? Sweet. Okay, cool. Nice to meet you all. It's always just good to have an idea of who I'm talking to as I go through these slides. My name is Jessie Dean. Thank you for the intro. This is my first time presenting at the World Tea Expo, so I'm super excited. I was so enthused by what I saw yesterday, and my hope is that some of those threads in this presentation will pull through. I loved visiting the regenerative agriculture presentation yesterday. Nepal Tea had a great presentation too about direct sourcing and sort of social mission-driven companies, and so I'm just super excited. I feel like it's great to be in the same room with like-minded folks that are changing the world through tea and having this hugely positive impact on the world and solving problems. So, without further ado, we'll jump in. So, today we're talking about the concept of farm to teacup. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. What is farm to teacup? How did this come about for us as a business? We're still a pretty young business, by the way, about 4.5 years old. So what was the inspiration behind starting this way? The definition of farm to teacup, and then some of the key sort of core elements of farm to teacup, and how to implement those in your own businesses as well. And I'm hoping at least there will be some takeaways of how to draw from that and implement in your own business. I'd like to start with this quote from one of my favorite nature writers and poets, Gary Snyder. He said that our relation to the natural world must be grounded in a place and have an easy familiarity with the local plants. I think probably especially as farmers and growers, it's really a driving factor of the work that we're doing. And I think for all of us actually in any facet of working with tea and agricultural products. Today I'll talk a little bit about the journey from seed to sip, both from our perspective as a business, and hope to pass on some of the learnings that we've taken in as we've gone through this journey ourselves, but also the journey of the plants from seed to sip. What that really looks like, from being grown on the farm all the way to the end user and consumer and the tea being brewed in your cup. And three core elements that I find to be most overarchingly important in farm to teacup, a farm to teacup business model, are building transformative grower-buyer relationships. And by transformative, I mean beyond an initial transaction, right? There's a transaction that occurs. We purchase materials from the producer or grower buyer. But what has been really instrumental for me is that long-term, transformational relationship that's been built by working with the same growers and producers for years. We'll also talk about creating value chains versus supply chains and what that means. And some of the benefits and challenges, quite a few. I've got quite a few of those to talk about. Benefits of sourcing in this way and challenges to implementing a farm to teacup model. Farm to teacup, so what does that mean? I'm sure everyone's heard the term farm to table. What we're trying to do is translate a farm farm-to-table mentality, which often is applied to restaurants, produce, other industries across multiple industries, and apply that to the tea industry and to our own business. And the benefit is really that we then get to experience this sort of terroir, right? Like the sense of place in the tea that we're drinking. Because we're sourcing directly fresh ingredients directly from local and regional farmers. So in a nutshell, that's what Farm to Teacup means. We're working directly with farmers as close to home as possible. And I want to say too that that's not the case for all of our ingredients, and I'll hit on that challenge a little bit throughout this presentation. We also source green tea, black tea, things like that that are not grown in our region, which is the southeastern United States. Tea can be grown there. It is being grown there. We definitely are developing those relationships, but it's a very new space, very new industry in our area. So anyway, we'll talk about some of those challenges, but I wanted to say not everything we do is from our local farms, but about 80% of what we do is from our local farms. Our name, Asheville Tea Company, comes from the city of Asheville, where we're from. This is in North Carolina, in the southern Appalachian Mountains. And, for me, the inspiration behind starting this was looking at the space that we were living in. We're living in one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. The Asheville watershed also produces some of the purest and cleanest water in the United States, which is why we have a pretty vibrant brewery scene there. There are a lot of craft beverage breweries in Asheville. And we have over 300 small and medium scale farms just within sort of just the outskirts of city limits that are providing a lot of produce to restaurants and cafes in our area. So farm to table is a big sort of value system that our city and region holds. And so for me, I really wanted to take that and say, okay, how can we apply this to tea? I love tea, passionate about tea. How can I take those things and apply it? So some key elements of farm to table are that we are sourcing things that are fresh and in season. So we work with those growers throughout the growing season, from the very start all the way to the end. We're planning typically a year and a half in advance so that we can work together throughout that season to be able to bring in super fresh herbs. Grown and produced within the region, so a lot of tea leaves, and we still use some of these too. We work with amazing producers and suppliers outside of our region too, but a lot of those leaves have traveled 5, 6, 7,000 miles by the time they get to us as a manufacturer and producer and maker. So that's a pretty long way to go. It's a pretty long journey. It's a lot of hands to go through. And so what we're really trying to do is reduce the number of hands, reduce the miles traveled by sourcing within about 100 miles of where we live. I'm sure y'all have probably heard of this from like an eating local perspective or farm to table perspective. Another key element for us is that we're not ever going to use additives in our teas, like flavor crystals or preservatives, or other types of added flavorings, and that's because we don't know where those things come from. So we're really being really intentional about what we're putting in our tea blends as well, and what we're leaving out. And this allows us to be a part of the process and helps us to ensure quality, tell a story that we think our consumers value, and also really work directly with the farms to learn ourselves. We want to learn from the people that are growing our herbs and botanicals, how they're being grown, whether they're being grown in a sustainable, better yet regenerative way, and what that really means and how that translates to the tea in the cup for the end user. And it's all about building relationships. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to pause here just for a second, and you all have 2 tea bags in front of you. I'd like for you, one is to take home and brew later, but the other is to go ahead and open and smell. So I just want everyone to take a minute to open and smell the tea. I love that face. I was hoping for one. And I'm curious if anyone wants to tell me how you feel, what you think, what you smell, what you notice.
Super fragrant.
Super fragrant?
Instantly calm.
Instantly calming. That's awesome.
just visually, it looks fresh. I mean, the dried herbs, and everything, but visually, it looks fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. So what if I told, oh, sorry, maybe one or two more. Anybody have? Yeah.
I'd say it smells potent and also like a licorice smell from the inside.
Licorice. Notes of licorice. That's awesome. That's what I often say about that one. That's cool. And potent. Yeah. Yeah, so these herbs and botanicals are grown in the southeastern United States. The goal is that these are coming across as a really, really fresh and potent tea experience. I wanted to highlight some of the amazing farms that do grow these ingredients. Anise hyssop. I'm going to talk about this piece later too, but sourcing locally also allows us to work with things that are really unique, that you can't typically find in big quantities in other places. And for me so far, I think anise hyssop is out there. But for me, this is one herb that we haven't been able to find, in big quantities on a broader scale, other than working locally with local farms, which does have that sort of aniseed licoricey note that I love so much. And this is grown by 3 farms: Gentle Harmony, Maple Spring Gardens, and Pangea Plants in western and central North Carolina. All of our Tulsi also comes from Pangea Plants, which is out by a beautiful lake in the mountains in western North Carolina. Pangea Plants is one of the only certified biodynamic medicinal herb farms in our area, so that's a really nice thing too, that we get to work with growers that share our values and really take it to the next level too. And our lavender comes from western NC and also northern Georgia. And the chamomile, we don't source all of our chamomile locally. That is one of the things that we're working on. This is definitely an iterative process, and not all of it's being grown in big quantities yet, but some of it is grown, again, in western North Carolina. And that one right there, you can see the little white flowers around it. I find that often those local herbs really do maintain the wholeness of the flower or the herb a lot more too. So that's what you've got in your tea bag. Brew it later. See what you think. One consideration here, and I think this is something, again, that because this is an iterative process for us, we don't source everything locally. Again, it's about 80%. We would love for that to be 100%, and maybe someday we'll get there. There are definitely things that aren't there yet, and we hope to continue to always grow and move in that direction. But that said, and I think this is one of the challenges and big questions I have for myself within this industry is, what do we do with the items that we're not sourcing locally? How can we apply these tenets, right, to the things that we're also sourcing globally? We'll talk more about that. But, the consideration for me that really drives Farm to Teacup as a value is that so many of these herbs and botanicals travel so far, and they've been through so many hands, so many pieces of the puzzle before they get to the end user and that packaged tea product on the shelf. And I think one thing we are trying to do more and better is find ways that we can really tell that story for the consumer. I think a lot of teas on the shelf, and probably like everyone in this room, I'm like a big tea buyer and buying all the tea all the time. So, but I don't often see on those packages where those ingredients came from and who grew them, and so I think that is our mission. that is something that we need to continue to build and tell, stories we need to tell. And we're really trying to reduce. So we're trying to reduce the number of hands that have worked with the herbs and botanicals all along that chain. And in exchange, really build this transparent, authentic relationship with both the farmer and the consumer. And we think that's valuable to our consumers. We think that's trending across industries, I think, and that's a lot of value for folks that are looking for that story, looking for that connection with what they're putting in their bodies. I know I do for sure. So the goal is to build connection all along the way. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about one of our farms and just sort of the story of how this happens and what this has actually meant for us. One of the main farms that we work with is called Rayburn Farms. Again, they're in Western North Carolina, about 15 minutes away from where we produce the tea. And we met Michael and Lauren and their dog Leroy right when we were starting our business. And so at that time, we were trying to learn and find out, okay, where are the farms that we can connect with? Who's growing herbs in this area or has capacity to? What's actually being grown? What can grow well in this region? We also wanted to align from a values perspective with those growers, so like who's growing in a way that we feel really good about, that is regenerative and sustainable. And we met the Rayburns. And so they had this like little dehydrator, you know, those brown sort of stackable dehydrators, and we would try like, okay, you're growing lime basil. That, I have never heard of that. You know, what is it? What would that even taste like? So we dry like a few ounces of lime basil, taste test, try it with a couple different herbs. We're blenders, you know, so we're blending with other things. Like how could this relate to like hibiscus or peppermint? You know, and that was really how we started, on a super small scale, together, testing these products, seeing what would grow and what would scale and be grown in a larger, like on a larger scale. And we just went from there. And so about 3 years ago, so this was 1.5 years into our business, we became Rayburn Farms' largest buyer. Prior to that, they were selling mainly to restaurants and breweries, so growing, you know, freshly grown products for those spaces. And so they just started drying herbs. So we became their #1 buyer, and then about 1.5 years ago, they became an investor in Asheville Tea Company. So that for me was a really special sort of cyclical process whereby we've really grown together and grown our businesses together. So they're just a great example. And we work with over 12 farms now in the region. We've all developed similar relationships over time. And you can see now, that's Michael back there, they built this huge standalone drying room, you know, and so we've been able to collaborate on that process throughout this time too, which has been a really rewarding process. And that's that mojito mint he was harvesting. Mojito mint is the original mint used in a mojito. It's a Cuban varietal, and so that's another fun one that we were able to play with. We blend it with lime basil, actually. But yeah, so drying mojito mint in this huge dryer that they've built now, so that they've been able to really scale that process for their business. So our aim is to really generate those types of partnerships with the farms that we work with, and we like to call it a partnership. And I think that's really sort of one of those things that is a work in progress, you know, because it's a lot of work, as I'm sure the tea growers and farmers in this room know. It's a lot of work to grow and produce those herbs and botanicals. So as a buyer, it's so important that we say, what can we do to support that process? How can we actively be involved in that process? And what does a partnership really look like from the farmer's perspective, you know? Some of those things that we've started to do and that we've learned are helpful by working with our farmers, or that we visit frequently. So I know this isn't possible a lot of times for things that are sourced from further abroad. Sorry, check. Not possible for things that are sourced from further abroad, but that may be the case for some folks in this room too. I think a lot of people here probably do go visit those global farms and global growers too. But that has been so helpful, you know, because then we can troubleshoot in the moment. We can figure out what the capacities looking like. As we all know, this is an agricultural product, so there are all kinds of variables, you know, that go into the growing season. So we can get a finger on the pulse of what the status is and what we need to do. We've also worked together to develop quality standards, and that's been really a positive process as well. Sorry, I keep wanting to try to connect to the internet. Yeah, so building out the new dry room, we were able to say, okay, well, what is it that we need in terms of quality management in the field? You know, we definitely want to be sure our products are not sprayed, for example, or are grown organically. We don't require certifications, any certifications actually, other than good manufacturing practices and post-harvest handling quality standards, but we don't require an organic certification or biodynamic for our local farms, and I feel like that is one thing that can be cost prohibitive. I mean, those are great. I think the certifications are great and can really help guide a buyer like me, particularly for the things that aren't grown locally. But it can be really cost prohibitive and logistically prohibitive for local farms. So we don't require it. But one thing we do is we work together to develop those quality standards. Make sure that our products are clean in the field, and make sure that when they're being dried, they're being done to spec and for what our needs are as well, milled to the right size so they can fit in the tea bags, all of these things. One direction we're headed in quickly and quick and fast is contracts and deposits with our farms. Rayburn Farms is the first farm that we worked with to develop a contract, a growing contract for the season. That's another thing that we found to be really helpful and beneficial, as well as an upfront deposit for the farms that we're working with. And that allows folks to buy the supplies needed, seeds, starts, and, whatever's needed for the farm early in the season to get started in the growing season. And the contract, what we want to do actually is move to multi-year contracts with the shared goal and vision that the farmers know what to expect and that they have an active buyer who's committed to buying the products they're growing. So it's not like growing something and then trying to find a fit in the marketplace. So it provides that security on the farmer side, and on our side it provides security as well, because we know what to expect. We know what's coming down the supply chain for us. So that's been a really great thing that we're still working on building out. Planning well in advance is also helpful. I think I said that earlier. We meet, a year before the growing season, the prior year, to talk about capacity, talk about what our needs are, talk about what's growing well for them and what's not, etc. And then there are a ton of opportunities for co-promotion too, which has been really great. We've done some collaborative products, we co-market, we do events together often, and so those things are really helpful too. I'm definitely a big believer in a rising tide lifting all ships, and so that's been a great thing to do so that we can all grow together, help Rayburn Farms, for example, find additional buyers too, and help us promote our products as well. So it's a great partnership in that way. I feel like I hit on a lot of this, but just to summarize a few benefits of sourcing in a farm-to-teacup way, and I've framed this, hopefully you can read that okay, but I've framed this, y'all have heard of B Corp certification, or like the triple bottom line model or approach, maybe some folks in this room. This is an approach we really resonate with from a values perspective, and it's looking at our business from the perspective of having a triple bottom line, not one bottom line, which typically traditionally is profit, right? That's the typical traditional one bottom line. The triple bottom line is the 3 Ps, now 4, and I added a 5th, but it's typically the 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit. All equally important, all equally factored into our business model and how we approach our business. So looking at it, I added plants, plants too. The 4th P before plants is now purpose. So you'll hear people say the triple bottom line plus purpose. So developing a really purpose-built, impact-built company. So some of the values from that lens are that we are able to build value and relationships and create wealth within our community. We're not just pinching the farmers, pinching our suppliers every step of the chain, every link in the chain. But what we're doing is we're actively working to create value and wealth building in our community. The relationships just in general too have been one of the most rewarding parts for me, because I mean these are dear friendships, that now we've developed over time, and there's this sort of shared interest in everyone's success. And so that's been really fantastic. From my perspective as a maker and producer, it's also been really beneficial because it allows me to feel like I can be really creative. I can work with things like mojito mint, anise hyssop, lime basil, the leaves, hibiscus leaves rather than the fruit, ginger grass rather than the roots. all kinds of things that I wouldn't be able to have access to otherwise. So that for me is really fun. We can work with unique different ingredients and come up with fun ideas. And this one is actually kind of a complicated one, but supply security, I have found, particularly this year, I would imagine and guess that most of us have felt some constraints this year with COVID. We are too. We're out of stock of certain things. We are, delayed. Oops, I'm sorry that we keep wanting to get online here. But yeah, we're delayed with supply and ingredients in various different places, and that's been really challenging. But an interesting thing that I found this year was that there was a lot of resiliency in working with our local and regional producers. We were able to, because we had that direct relationship, because we were in the same community, we could problem solve and plan actively in the moment. And so our local supply is really what was not affected by COVID. And so that was just a really interesting takeaway. And then for the consumer, I think the benefits are hopefully a great cup of tea, something that's really fresh, maybe a little bit different, and the ability to kind of connect with an authentic story that takes the consumer on a journey all the way back to the farm, to the seed, to the plants. From a planetary perspective and natural environment, planet health perspective, it also reduces our carbon footprint significantly. Back to that slide a few slides ago, we're looking at thousands of miles for importing some of our ingredients versus, less than 100 miles from where we live and produce. It's also a collaborative opportunity for us to learn, and like I said, I really enjoyed the regenerative agriculture presentation yesterday, and that's something that I'm really diving into personally and learning about. But working with farmers directly too allows me to do that, because I can learn from them, learn what biodynamic really means, what does that look like on the ground, and how does that translate to this delicious cup of tea that I'm having, or this Tulsi or holy basil that tastes totally different from the Tulsi or holy basil that I order from Amazon, whatever that might be, So it allows me to really connect and have opportunities for learning and growth. From a profit perspective, I think there's actually a business case for this too, and we're all tea business people, so I think that's relevant as well. I really truly believe that consumers, I know I as a consumer of, whatever, and am driven by wanting to know that the purchases I make have an impact, a positive impact, and that I am buying things that from companies whom I share values with. So I think transparency and traceability, threads I've heard throughout yesterday as well, are huge opportunities within this industry, in this space. And I think that does translate to higher profits too. I think it all interrelates because I think it's driven by consumer demand. It gives us an opportunity as well to have a purpose-driven company and to build something that we believe in, to have a real positive impact. And the plants, I added plants, the 5th P, because, I think this is important. Maintaining the vitality and the potency of the plants, to me, is a really big driving factor. I'm super excited that somebody said that when you smelled the tea, because I think it does make a difference, to have a smaller footprint, and fewer hands that it's traveled through by the time it gets to the cup. And we can celebrate that sense of place. For us, this is about developing that terroir, what that means for herbs and botanicals in the Southeast. And it gives us all a chance to really celebrate that, as well as traditions around that. I want to talk about value chains for a minute. So shifting tack into this mode. This graphic shows, right here, the fraction of each earned dollar that traditionally farmers have often made. And I think that's pretty significant because it is only a small piece of the puzzle in traditional supply chain driven models. What we're aiming to do is build value chains, not just supply chains. And this is a business model that's really based on collaboration. So this is based on shared values social, environmental, economic, and also based on the idea that a rising tide does lift all ships, right? That this is collaborative. This is not everyone out for themselves, but that there's a lot of benefit in doing that for our communities. So as buyers, we have the ability to support people and practices that do have a positive impact and create a better product as a result. Just to dive into that a little more fully, so this is actually some data from Yellowwood Associates and the Ford Foundation. And the main thing I wanted to highlight on this slide is that a traditional supply chain really does sort of stem from the producer, not necessarily demand from the consumer. It's largely based on this idea that everyone's in it for themselves. We're going to penny pinch all along the chain so that we can pass on a low-cost product to the end user. A value chain, though, is about creating wealth at every link in the chain. So it's not everyone for themselves, it's we're all in this together, right? We value that. We see benefit in that. And so rather than penny pinching all along the chain, we're going to pay fair prices to our farmers. We're going to look for packaging suppliers in the Southeast, wherever possible. That's more expensive. But there's value, and we believe our consumer thinks there's value too. This is me with my kids. So I just wanted to just show kind of these last couple slides. For me, the biggest benefit and takeaway overall is that it does allow us to be a part of the process, to source ingredients in a farm-to-teacup way, and that's so rewarding, so beneficial. This is that farm out in Lake Lure, and we're harvesting milky oats, and this was one of the first times I went out to one of the farms, and my kids were picking milky oats and like eating them and tasting them, and they would never have had that experience, had we not been able to connect directly with the farms. And so that was a really powerful experience that stayed with me. And I'm going to talk about, this is a very happy slide, but I'm going to transition into some of the challenges too of this model because it's not without its challenges, and we're certainly still learning a lot. This is a picture of a lot of our team members, and we were out doing a volunteer project at a local conservancy called Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy. We did this about a month ago, and we were like spreading compost and helping. They have a farm incubator program to help new farmers get into the farming business and connect with buyers. So we wanted to do a volunteer day and learn more about that program and how we could be supportive of not only the existing partners and farms that we've been working with, but how do we help new farmers get into this business and be an active player there as a buyer, looking for products, looking for supply. How can we be helpful? So we went out and did a volunteer day there, which was really great and helped us gain some more perspective too on what it really means to be a farmer and how difficult that is. It's really a challenging process to produce those products. So some of the challenges and opportunities for growth that I found, that I certainly think that we have as a business, and sort of questions I wanted to pose to the group too, because I think they're important questions as an industry as well, are around, let me say too, I don't have the answers to these. These are things I don't have the answer to. And I love being able to come here to the World Tea Expo, for example, because I can learn from all of you too, and from all the speakers here too, to help find those answers. But these are things that I think I certainly spend a lot of time thinking about. We are trying to scale a business, and grow. At the same time, one of our farmers one time told me, I hear you, Jessie, but sustainability is slow, It's not just like a blitz scale and we're this, profitable big business. If we want to do this from a values perspective, it's going to take some time. And I think that's really important because we're not willing to sacrifice those values for scale, So it's a really adaptive, iterative process to try to get there. and it's a collaborative process to try to get there. I think some of the biggest things that I would like for us to continue to learn are around environmental and plant conservation. You know, how can we play a more active role there? We definitely donate to land conservancies. We definitely source our products in collaboration with local farms, and I believe that those things contribute. But how can we really be activists? You know, not just passive, donations or buyers. How can we be activists in this space? Same with social justice. I think this is a big deal. I mean, we think about the southeastern United States in farming and sourcing, and I think that's integrated. You know, we need to be thinking about that and learning how to not only buy from who we're currently buying from, but actively build out wealth-building value chains for folks who want to get into farming in rural communities around the southeast too. What about Camellia sinensis? This is another big question that I have. You know, the southeastern U.S. is in the tea belt, so it is in a region where tea can grow. You know, it's not about the right elevation, similar climate to other tea growing regions, about that latitude, and so that's really interesting to me that could be something that could be developed over time within our region, and we just haven't gotten there yet on a big scale. In the meantime, what do we do with the other 20 or 30% of the ingredients that we're not buying locally? You know, how can we take these principles and apply them to the global suppliers that we do also work with? You know, we need to go visit those farms. We need to create direct connections with farmers in other parts of the world. One thing I found helpful, but not the end-all be-all, is certifications. You know, we definitely look to buy organic and fair trade tea leaves. So that's a helpful guide, but I feel like that's not the end of the story. You know, we would really like to do more to learn about those suppliers that aren't right in our region. And I think that's also about learning where we can have impact in other communities too, not just our own. We've been very focused on building this within our community and creating value within our community, but how can we take that and do that on a more global scale? And price and cost, I threw that in there too. This is expensive. You know, it's expensive. Paying a fair price to the farmers that are growing our products is definitely expensive, and that makes our cost of our end product more expensive for the consumer. But again, I feel like there's demand and value from consumers for that type of product, and for a product that has that authenticity and traceability. I'll close with just a couple of practical next steps. If anybody's looking to implement some elements of Farm to Teacup in your business, this is how I got started. You know, really just looking within your region and your area, connecting with local extension offices. They will be able to connect you with farmers directly and explain and let you know what's being grown in the area. We have a great organization in Asheville too called the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. So I wonder if there may be other nonprofits in your regions too that you could connect with. Their mission is to really help to develop local farming and farm-to-table opportunities, connect growers with buyers, this sort of thing. So there may be other nonprofits around other regions that are doing the same. Conferences and networking events like this one, I think this is a great opportunity to connect with other sources. That's certainly what I plan to do here. You know, we want to connect with the growers in other regions for green tea and black tea, things that we aren't sourcing locally. So this is a great opportunity to do that. And even just farmers markets and like the good old local library. These are great places to find resources too on herbal traditions in various different regions and what's typically been grown in those regions. And then I wanted to highlight two organizations that have really become guiding forces for me, the American Botanical Council and the Sustainable Herb Project. Happy to send these slides too if anyone wants to email me at the end. I've got some business cards too so that you can access those links. But those are great organizations that are asking a lot of these big picture questions too and providing webinars and resources and a lot of information around addressing them. all I have. Thank you so much. Thank you. Perfect. We have some time. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Yes.
You mentioned a couple of times that you pay a fair prices to the farmers. How do you determine what that fair price is? I mean, it's kind of a subjective.
It is.
Yeah.
That's a really good question, and it absolutely is. My answer to that, truthfully, is what we've done is have those honest conversations. What does it cost? How much time does it take? To get those plants in the ground, bring them to a harvestable state. What does that look like in terms of your labor and hourly fees? What does it look like in terms of costs? And what do you need to make? What do you need to make from this herb, say mojito mint? What do you need to make from a pound of dried mojito mint, given all those costs and considerations to make it worthwhile? We have honest dialogue about that, and I'll say too, here's the price point we're aiming for, to be able to hit the margins. We need to hit it too. Can we make this work? How can we make this work? So it's a really active process, I would say, and I totally agree, it's a subjective. Fair is very subjective. So I think having the community, that just open dialogue has been how we've determined that. Yeah. Yeah, happy to take any other questions. Okay. Well, thank you again. I'll be around for a minute if you want to come up and chat too. Thank you so much. Enjoy the